What is going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday night to you and yours. It is time, as always, for a brand new AAT Birds, all about the birds weekly report here on the AAT Sports Network. And as we've been doing these last couple weeks, we have been doing our special Eyeing the East segments. And that means it's time to talk to the one and only Lance Medow, who is from Sirius. He's on Sirius XM. He is a Giants radio network host. He's an on-air talent. As you can see by his shirt, he is all about the Columbia Lions. Westwood One Sports. I mean, this guy is, if there's anybody that we can talk to about the Giants, it's Lance Medow. So, Lance, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me back on, guys. Always a pleasure talking NFC East football, a division that we are certainly all invested in across the board from some different perspective.
That's true. And, there's a lot to talk about with our teams. You have the rivalry, and I think teams in possibly different scenarios right now. But again, it's so for me, the Giants Eagles, it's always a battle, no matter what the records are. And that's, that could be said with all the divisional opponents, but I think this one I'm looking forward to because there's a lot of questions with the Giants and something that you can help us answer and have, our viewers learn a little bit more about what's going on in Giant Land.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. I think there's certainly a question marks on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. And that comes because you got a new coaching staff and you have new coordinators, which really has been a huge storyline for the Giants over the last 6 years or so. So fire away, guys. I'm ready to answer as many questions as you'd like to throw my way.
Well, it's interesting that you use the word fire because you guys fired probably one of the most colorful coaches in the NFL at the end of last season. And I feel, as an Eagles fan, rightfully so, although I'm going to miss Joe Judgeisms. So how has the fan base been responding to a very highly sought-after hot head coach in Brian Daboll? And what's the difference like? Because as of the last preseason game and some of the expletives that were dropped, it doesn't seem like they're that much different. So talk to us a little bit about the new coaching staff and why Joe Judge wasn't the guy and maybe this new one is.
Well, I think the biggest difference is the offensive philosophy, guys. That's really the place to start, and that's really the place to end. Daniel Jones hasn't had much stability during the course of his career, and that goes even beyond Joe Judge. Remember, he started with Pat Shurmur, and that only lasted 2 years. Then Joe Judge came in. You had Jason Garrett as his offensive coordinator. Garrett didn't even last a full tenure. Freddie Kitchens ultimately replaced him. So now you have Brian Daboll and you have Mike Kafka. So you have the Buffalo philosophy, the Kansas City philosophy being infused into making this Giants offense. So to go back to your question, I think the reason why the fan base is a little bit more excited is you look at the track record of both of those teams and how both of those offenses have operated over the last few seasons. Now, the big caveat here is, of course, you don't have Patrick Mahomes and you don't have Josh Allen. And that is a noticeable big difference. It's one thing to bring in the coordinators, but it's another thing to then have the level of play equate to what Buffalo and Kansas City had. Now, with that being said, you were referencing the preseason. What I think is the biggest takeaway from the first two preseason games is, and I'm not one, guys, personally, I don't read much into preseason results, even point-wise, individual-wise, because most of the opponents you go up against, they don't play their full starters. It's hard to really have a lot of takeaway from that standpoint. However, I will say this. In previous years, when the Giants were going up against second-tier players, third-tier players, the offense would struggle. You don't really see that in the first two preseason games. You're seeing functional offenses, guys moving the ball methodically up and down the field, finishing, situational football, the fundamentals that have also been the Achilles heel of this team. So those are the encouraging signs. If you were to ask me the biggest difference between what we saw under Joe Judge versus now what we're seeing under Brian Daboll. And while, that may not seem like a lot to somebody outside looking in, and I get that, and I'm not trying to paint this rosy picture because, once again, preseason only indicates a lot, but that is actually moving the mountains for the Giants compared to where they were early in the preseason in previous years.
So, with that, the one question I want to bring up still sticking with the offensive side of the ball. And it's one question that the Giants have had for numerous years. They've tried to patch it up is the offensive line. They tried to do big free agent signings. They tried to draft. So you have Andrew Thomas and you have Evan Neal on, both bookend tackles. They lost Will Hernandez, which he really, a little bit of disappointment for them. But what do you make of the offensive line from training camp? How they're looked in the preseason games in terms of how they're going to solidify that.
And that's another change that should not be overlooked in terms of what you had under Joe Judge versus now what they're operating with Brian Daboll. And to your point, they were aggressive this offseason. They addressed the line in free agency. They brought in Mark Lewinsky from the Indianapolis Colts, who was part of a unit that clearly ran the ball very effectively with Jonathan Taylor. Then they brought in John Feliciano from Buffalo. So he was with Brian Daboll and Bobby Johnson, the new offensive line coach. However, he has more experience at guard. He's now transitioning to being a full-time center. So that's at least important to note. But still, somebody that's been in the league for many years and has familiarity with the scheme. And the plan was at left guard for Shane Lemieux to reclaim his job. He missed all of last season. He was their late-round pick 2 years ago. Unfortunately, he's banged up again. So his status for the start of the season is up in the air, but they are hoping that he won't miss significant time, even if he is not back in the early stages of the season. And then you have the bookends that you were referencing. You invested high picks in the draft in each of the last few seasons in Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. So when you look at this line as a whole, we're talking about Andrew Thomas is the only guy you're carrying over from last season who played. That's it. You got 4 new starters. By default, that certainly infuses a lot of new faces and hopefully better results. And I think, once again, if you look at the preseason, if I'm talking about the offense being more functional, providing protection, being able to run the football, I think the early results are encouraging. Now, it's one thing, guys, to do that against a Patriots team and a Bengals team that wasn't putting out the DJ Readers of the world, the Trey Hendricksons of the world. It's another thing to see them do that against Bud Dupree of the Tennessee Titans in week number 1. Then we're going to get to really separate the men from the boys. But on paper, to answer your question, yes, this is a revamped offensive line. The biggest issue that has presented itself is durability. John Feliciano has been banged up in the preseason. I mentioned Shane Lemieux. Thomas, Neal, and Glowinski, for the most part, have held up. You just hope that this group can stay together, because what has also come back to bite the Giants, guys, in previous years has been the continuity or the lack thereof. They have not been able to keep the 5 guys on the field together, and that's why you got this piecemeal puzzle that you're trying to put together, and it's hard to have any level of success. And once again, not to get off topic, you guys should realize that 2 years ago, if I'm correct, the Eagles had the most offensive line combinations. Okay.
Yes, we did.
Shaking your head. So there we go.
We are aware.
And I always use Philadelphia when I'm on Sirius XM NFL radio as the poster child to that point, because I actually think the Eagles, when fully healthy, have one of the best lines and one of the best depth charts you're going to find. But when you shred that to pieces, guys, and they're not healthy, doesn't mean much of anything at the end of the day.
Right, and that's where we got stuck with Jamone Brown, as we like to make fun of him on our network, who infamously, did the Michael Jackson glove rather than blocking. So yes, when you get to the very bottom of a depth chart, that's a problem. And it's interesting because we have, Gator, he's commenting in here, and I'm going to take his question and change it a little bit. So Gator's question is, with the upgrades in the O-line, can Daniel Jones take the step forward, or is it just a dead man walking? I'm going to change the question to, is Daniel Jones the guy, and how soon until Jimmy Garoppolo is traded to the Giants?
It's funny. If I had a nickel for every time I was asked that question about Jimmy Garoppolo, I wouldn't be joining you here. I'd be out on a boat whining and dining, just so you know. But in all seriousness, let me handle the Garoppolo situation first, because then that launches us into the Daniel Jones conversation. Jimmy Garoppolo is an upgrade, my personal opinion, to Jimmy Garoppolo. No disputing that. However, if you look at it from a salary cap perspective, there is no way they can afford to add Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm even talking about, guys, forget a trade. Let's say the Niners outright release him. So You don't have to worry about the $25 million or reconfiguring that. He's out on the street. The Giants don't have enough wiggle room to even offer him a respectable deal for a veteran. They barely have enough money to help them keep their head above water in the event that they suffer more injuries during the season. Remember, you need to allot cap space so that if you lose guys, you can bring in guys off the street or whatever it may be. They don't give you relief in the NFL CBA to say, oh, sure, here's $5 million more because you lost your starting center and 2 linebackers. And you guys should once again attest to that based on the 2017 season when you even won a Super Bowl, okay? And you know how many holes Doug Peterson had to fill in. We can save that for another program. I'm sure you guys would be more than happy to reminisce. But getting back to the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, so the money doesn't make sense.
Right.
And B, they brought in Tyrod Taylor. They gave him a multi-year deal. So to me, Taylor's the insurance policy. In the event that Daniel Jones gets hurt, number one, that's a huge upgrade based on Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm last season.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, you guys weren't complaining about that when you went up against
No, not at all. We were fine with Mike Glennon and all of his necks.
Sure, 100%. Sign me up for that. Just put yourself in the shoes of having to watch that for the last 6 games of the season, okay?
You mean and root for it because that's...
Well, forget rooting for it. From a professional standpoint, covering it and trying to find something to talk about after the game, okay? At least have some empathy and sympathy for a broadcaster, okay? That's all I'm asking.
Deal.
But
Fair enough.
I digress and get back to the point here. So Taylor is the insurance policy for this year and next year. So that's why I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is an option because I think that they have themselves covered, at least in the short term, with a bridge quarterback, and then they can look at the draft. Now, the Daniel Jones question. Does the offensive line help his cause? Yes, absolutely, if you compare it to what he's working with last season. But Daniel needs to answer this question all by himself. Can he stay healthy? Can you tell me that Daniel's going to play 15 games this year? If the answer is yes, then, hey, that certainly is promising. But, guys, he's missed at least 2 starts in every single one of his seasons. Even the year when Eli started the first 2, Daniel took over week 3. Daniel still got hurt that year. Because remember, Eli Manning made a few starts later that season. So no matter the scenario, he has not proven to be durable. That's number one. Number 2, he's not Josh Allen. If they're going to ask him to run the ball like they did in Buffalo, I'm a little bit concerned because I don't think Daniel can absorb the level of hits that Josh Allen did. Josh Allen's built like a linebacker. Josh Allen can run. Josh Allen can take that. That's not a problem. I don't think Daniel can. So that remains to be seen. And then the third element in play is the receiving core. Can that group hold up? Remember, Kadarius Toney couldn't get through a whole season last year in his rookie campaign. Kenny Golladay was banged up. Sterling Shepard tore his Achilles late in the season. Now, all those guys are in the mix, but it's one thing when I talk about the Giants receiving core in week 1, week 2. What does this group look like in week 8, week 9? That could very well change the conversation. So the point is there's so many elements around Daniel Jones, including his health, that have to be answered that will obviously indicate what level of success he'll have this season. So I know it's a long-winded answer. My point is the jury is still out for Daniel Jones this season and for his future as the Giants quarterback. I don't think anything has been solidified at all.
And I got to kind of follow up on that because isn't that just a little frustrating? Because you go, honestly, when Daniel Jones was drafted, I kind of, from my perch atop knowing everything mountain, when I think that's a bit of a reach pick. I mean, he wasn't that exceptional in college, but he was, anointed the heir apparent to I would argue the greatest quarterback in Giants history. He has not lived up to the bill. So at what point, what's it going to take for Daniel Jones to either get the fan base behind him or for them to go, you know what, this was a mistake and move on?
Well, it's interesting when you worded it, get the fan base behind him. As you know, in Philadelphia, in New York, very rarely, even Eli Manning was a polarizing figure. Okay, so if Eli's a polarizing figure, Daniel is certainly going to have his fair share of supporters, and he's going to have his fair share of critics, regardless of what he does this season. But let's peel back the layers to your question, because I think it is very interesting. Number one, Daniel Jones was not drafted by this new regime. So he has no ties to Joe Shane, the new GM, or Brian Dable. My point is, if Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge were still here, I think the conversation is different with respect to expectations, because they brought him in. Joe Shane and Brian Dable could be more of the philosophy, okay, we inherited Daniel Jones. He was a high first-round pick. He hasn't had stability. He hasn't stayed healthy. Let's see what we get out of him with our offensive philosophy. We got nothing to lose. We didn't pick up the option. Final year of his rookie deal. You're not etched in stone to him long-term. It's a sensible move. Let's see what you get out of him. If it works, fantastic. You can give him the franchise tag. You give him maybe a 2-3 year deal with an option. That's fine. But you don't have to sign your life away to him. So that's one of the reasons why I don't look at it as, oh, Daniel Jones, it's life and death. He has to answer the call, because once again, it's a completely new regime. Then the second thing is, once again, when you don't have continuity around your quarterback, I'm not making excuses for Daniel Jones. His decision-making, and part of that is him putting himself in a precarious spot to get hurt. That's on the quarterback. But the other part of it is, and John Mara, the president, CEO, and co-owner of the team, has come out, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said this offseason. He said, we've done everything to screw this kid up, between the offensive line, between the coordinator changes, between the head coaching changes. So when you take that into consideration, yeah, Daniel Jones hasn't lived up to expectations. No doubt, Chip. But at the end of the day, the Giants haven't necessarily provided a conducive environment for him to fully capitalize. So it takes two to tango. It goes both ways. That's why, no, I'm not surprised that he hasn't come to fruition. But at the same time, yeah, it's show me time for him with respect to his future on this team.
So I'm going to kind of switch it and go to the defensive side of the ball now. And I want to talk about, Wink Martindale is the defensive coordinator. He did some great work in Baltimore. And you're looking at the defensive players that they have. They did lose some players. James Bradbury is now with the Eagles. You have Logan Ryan left. He's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they had some people get hurt, but they've got some pieces. How do you feel the fit with the new defensive coordinator and the way this defense and the defensive philosophy is going to be?
Well, Wink Martindale's philosophy has been to be extremely blitz happy. If you go back to his Baltimore days, he was the defensive coordinator there for 4 seasons prior, the linebackers coach, and he's aggressive. He's not going to sit back and allow you to dictate the tone. He's going to bring it to you. Now, the reason I preface it that way is, well, if it works and the guys get home and they sack the quarterback, it's a beautiful game plan. You don't get home, you leave those guys on the back end out to dry. It is going to be a long afternoon or a long evening. Now, you brought up the fact, Johnny, that James Bradbury is now a member of the team that you pull for. And that is a huge absence from the Giants' perspective. Now, I understand why the Giants moved on from him. Financially, they just couldn't afford to keep him. They had so many other needs they had to move on. But let's not overlook the X's and O's impact. They've got a Dory Jackson on one side, veteran corner, fine. On the opposite side of a Dory, it's a youth movement. Aaron Robinson was a rookie last year. He didn't play the full season. He missed the bulk of it with core muscle surgery. So he's still finishing out his rookie campaign, technically. Darnay Holmes, who's expected to be the nickel guy. He was a draft pick 2 years ago. He's had his ups and downs. He's also been banged up. The jury is still out with him. And then behind those two guys, you also have a lot of questions. You got Cordell Flott, who they drafted this year out of LSU, a lengthy guy, but he dealt with a groin injury this preseason in training camp. Rodarius Williams was a late draft pick last year. He also missed the bulk of last season. Notice the trend. Non-health, durability concerns, and inexperience outside of a Dory Jackson. So my point is, you're aggressive. You try to get after the quarterback. He's got Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari, and those guys are still young. I'm sure he's going to utilize the secondary guys in getting after the quarterback. If they're successful and they spread the wealth, that will go a long way to helping this defense. But if they don't get home, I think you're going to expose that secondary to a lot of ups and downs, and it could be a roller coaster, essentially, of a season where some games those guys play very well. They're sticky in coverage, and then other games, it's the complete opposite direction. I'll give you an example for maybe you guys or your viewers who weren't following Baltimore football that closely. I don't blame them. Last year, Wink was decimated by injuries in the secondary.
Yeah.
He lost safeties, he lost corners, and notice the Ravens defense struggled. Well, what does that show you? That shows you that your pass rush couldn't make up for the injuries, and when you take a hit in the secondary and you don't have as good cover guys, all of a sudden you can't run your scheme. So it remains to be seen how effective this secondary is going to be. If this secondary plays above expectations, the Giants defense is going to make noise. They're going to be a pleasant surprise. If that secondary has its ups and downs, there's going to be some games where I think teams are going to have a field day through the air.
And it's interesting you mentioned Kayvon Thibodeau because he kind of fell to you at 5. I thought he was probably the best player in the draft, at least on paper. And just outside of Aiden Hutchinson, who was again consensus number 1 overall, whatever. But now he's hurt. So is there a concern? Again, you mentioned durability and people staying healthy. Like I just happen to be on the depth chart on ESPN, and there's a lot of red markers all over your roster already. Is his durability a concern? I know he's going to miss a couple of games.
He held up for the most part at Oregon, so it's hard for me to classify that durability is concern, even though we haven't played a regular season game yet, and he's dealing with the sprained MCL that you're referring to. It is not as severe as they anticipated, which is good news. The timeline is 3 to 4 weeks. So there's a chance he returns week 1. There's a chance maybe they don't rush him. They say, hey, take an extra week or 2. I'd be surprised if he starts the year on IR because then you'd have to miss a minimum of 4 games. I think he'll probably beat that timeline. So maybe they keep him on the roster, but he still may not play week 1. The bottom line is it's very early to say there's concerns about durability because he didn't have that track record in college. So, no, I don't think there's an overly concern with respect to that. Now, Azeez Ojulari, the pass rusher opposite him, he got shaken up in conditioning drills at the tail end of practice today. It doesn't appear to be serious, but he was on the non-football injury list. So, you have a few things that are a bit of a red flag before the season starts. He led the team with 8 sacks last year, which was encouraging, and they're hoping with more talent opposite him, he could be even more productive. You got to keep those guys healthy. I think that was the main premise of your point because, yes, behind those 2 guys, a lot of questions. Just like I was talking about the secondary, you've got Jihad Ward, a veteran who they brought in, who was in Wink Martindale's defense, but he wasn't known as a big sack guy. And he's more of an in-betweener where he could play defensive end and linebacker. So maybe they toy with him back and forth. But we're talking about a guy that gave you 3 to 4 sacks. He's not giving you 8 or double digits. Can Leonard Williams get back to double-digit sacks, which he had 2 years ago? He's never had multi-year double-digit sack seasons. That was the first time in his career. That could be a huge X factor. If Leonard Williams could get a lot of penetration, does he benefit from having Thibodeau and Ojulari around him? But you've got O'Shane Ximenez, Quincy Roche, young guys they claimed off of waivers. They've shown flashes. They haven't necessarily been dominant. Carter Coughlin and Cam Brown were 2 late-round picks 2 years ago. I mean, I could sit here and give you a laundry list of players. The bottom line is nobody has the same track record or scratches the surface of Ojulari and Thibodeau. So they're top-heavy, Chip. But what top-heavy means is you lose one of those 2 guys, it could be trouble. And what it means is Wink Martindale is going to have to be that much more creative in generating a pass rush through multiple players as opposed to thinking maybe 1 or 2 guys could do the heavy lifting.
So, my final, thought here, what I want to, let you leave here with is give me the way you see this division breaking down.
Well, to me, the division is very similar to last season. I see Dallas and Philadelphia ahead of Washington and the Giants. I think there's 2 tiers to the NFC East. Now, let me preface it this way. There's no juggernaut in this division. I've been saying that for years, meaning there's no team that is going to roll over everybody else and has no chance against that team. There's a reason why, guys, we have not seen back-to-back NFC East champions since the Eagles won 4 years in a row from 2001 to 2004. It's my favorite statistic. No matter what show, platform I'm on, I throw it out ad nauseum. And whoever listens to me enough, good luck for listening to me to begin with, is tired of me saying that, okay? But there's validity behind it. I don't think there's a coincidence why that's happened. I think it's because there truly is not a juggernaut in this division. But Dallas and Philadelphia have far more balance and proven commodities than the other two teams. Now, what's interesting about Dallas and Philadelphia, since we talked a lot about the Giants, is Dak, to me, is the best quarterback in the division. I don't think it's close. I think you know exactly what you're getting out of Dak Prescott. Jalen Hurts, the rushing attack was very intriguing last year. I think you want to see more of the passing attack complement what he could do as a runner this season. And he's got the ingredients around him with the arrival of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith year 2, and Dallas Goedert. Meaning you can't point to last year you could say, well, Jalen, the receiving core didn't help him out. I remember, guys, the Giants game at MetLife Stadium. Rager, and I know that's probably a sensitive topic for the two of you and your viewers, but I like to poke the bear on every program I go to. Okay? No, Rager had an opportunity to win that game, not once, but twice, if you recall. He had 2 shots in the end zone, right? So I don't blame Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts' throws were actually on the money. So there's an example of the wide receiver didn't help him. But there were other circumstances where maybe you expected a little bit more out of your quarterback. The point is, I think the receiving core has vastly improved. So that you figure should help Jalen Hurts. I also think the Eagles have the best backup quarterback in the NFL. If Gardner Minshew needs to fill in for him, I think you guys are in a very good position. And I understand that he did that against the Jets and nobody's throwing a parade. But you know what? You expect him to carve up the Jets like he did last season. So that also, I think, bodes well for the Eagles. Philadelphia, though, I think is much more balanced between their defense and their offense from top to bottom than the Cowboys. Dallas's defense was a pleasant surprise last year. Dan Quinn did wonders for that group. And I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff, even though they don't have Randy Gregory. Micah Parsons is still there. DeMarcus Lawrence. I think Quinn will move his pieces around in the secondary. I just wonder, we got the news about Tyron Smith earlier today at left tackle. How does that impact the team? No Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup coming off an injury. They don't have Cedric Wilson. I just wonder, is this going to be a team where maybe the offense doesn't hit its stride until maybe midway through the season because the timing and the offensive line and this and that? And do the Eagles take advantage of that if it's a relatively slow start for the Cowboys? But the Giants, I just told you, they have questions on both sides. And Washington, I love their front four with all those former first-round picks. But Chase Young starting off on PUP, so he's going to miss a good portion of the season. And Carson, I thought he had a respectable season in Indy. If you look at the 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, you can't criticize. I mean, anyone would sign up for that. It was just in the big moments, game on the line, what is he going to do? If he excels for Washington, maybe they're a sneaky team. But I still think that's a big question mark. So, once again, I think Dallas and Philadelphia are ahead of the pack compared to the other two. And likely one of those two teams, barring injuries, is going to win the division this year.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that's a solid look at the whole division. And I want to thank you, Lance, for coming on like you do. And we chat with you and we pick your brain about all things relating to the Giants. And what I appreciate most is that you give a very honest, thorough opinion about what it is that you're seeing. So as always, we do thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, like I said, guys, pleasure coming on with you. Thank you for allowing me to come on. It's always good talking NFC East football, as I mentioned, and getting the other lens and the other perspective of things. And look forward to maybe reconvening as we inch closer to some Giants-Eagles games this season.
Absolutely. Again, make sure you are following Lance. He is all over social media. He's all over SiriusXM. Lance is that guy. You can find him on Twitter. Probably easiest place to find him at Lance Medow. Lance, again, thank you for joining us. Gator says thank you as well. While we let you escape, we are going to play a quick mid-show commercial where we are trying to get a full bus of Eagles to Eagles fans to FedEx Field to rag on Carson Wentz. So, again, we are going to be right back. Make sure you stick around. Lance, again, thank you for joining us.
Take care, guys. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
There's a storm coming.
You sound like you're looking forward to it.
I'm adaptable.
And as the commercial said, make sure you are getting your tickets to the Ultimate Bus Trip through Philly Sports Trips. Again, we are going to go invade FedEx Field on September 25th. Please make sure you are getting your tickets. And when they're asking, hey, who sent you here? It is, of course, all about the birds, although we are joined by all these amazing, amazing podcasts and 97.5. I mean, all these great people. So make sure you are getting your tickets. Tell them that All About the Birds sent you. But you want to get those tickets pretty darn soon. I know I will be there. Johnny, I'm pretty sure you're going to be there.
Yes.
So there you go. You want to make sure that you are getting those tickets pretty soon. All right, Johnny, what do you think about what Lance said?
You know, he had a lot of good points, and you know, you look at this division, and of course, for me, when I look at the division, the Giants are the team on the bottom, in my opinion, right now. Now, there's a lot of unknowns to see kind of what they have: new head coach, new defensive coordinator, new staff coming in. And I feel that could they surprise? Maybe a little bit, but again, the thing is they got a lot of young pieces that they're trying to grow. So it's of course it's rebuilding. That's what they're doing. So for me, does Daniel Jones take that step? Unfortunately, I don't think so. My opinion on it is he's the bridge quarterback, and honestly, I think between halfway into the season, I feel he's going to get replaced by Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor knows the offense. He's been with Brian Dable. He's been with Buffalo. He knows what they're doing there. If you give me the opinion, I think Tyrod Taylor wins you more games than Daniel Jones will. How many more?
I don't think that this Giants team made any kind of improvements this offseason. Other than drafting Kayvon Thibodeau and firing Joe Judge. I mean, I don't appreciate that as an Eagles fan. But I know that Dable should, in theory, be better. Now, there was a lot going on with Dable, like he should get this job, he should get this job, he should get this job, and just kept being passed over and over. Yeah. So I'm going to be very curious to see maybe what it was that was holding him back. But Daniel Jones is a bad quarterback. You can watch, and I call them highlights because that's what they're called, but you can watch video replays of him missing receivers by 15 to 20 yards in 7-on-7 drills when he's not getting rushed. I mean, he's not a good quarterback. He was drafted way higher than he should be, and he's never lived up to it.
And the thing is, you get that every year.
You
no
do.
Matter how much people say.
It's the rush on quarterbacks.
Yeah, you know, you never know. Everyone wants that quarterback. And the way rosters are built now and the way that you want to try to succeed with the quarterback in their rookie contract. You don't want the quarterback sitting 3-4 years and then finally being able to see kind of what they have in terms of what Aaron Rodgers did, in terms of what Steve Young did, you know, back in the day. That was a little further back, but you want to get that immediate result from the quarterback. And because the quarterback's contract is so low, you don't have to pay him the $35-40 million a year. You have ability to build around. And that's what Seattle did with Russell Wilson. They got a quarterback. They drafted him. He was able to step right in, able to play. They could build around him. They could get the pieces around him, you know, overpay or whatever they needed to do. And then once they gave him that big contract, they really didn't do much of anything because you have to allocate all that money. And I feel that's why you see the rush on quarterbacks. And that's why Daniel Jones goes so high, because he shows a set of skills that, you know, a lot of quarterbacks do show, and they wind up a big arm, able to move a little bit. There's quarterbacks every single year that happens to, but the fact of the matter is the reason that it happens is because they want to get those immediate results right away in the first couple of seasons, where then you can load up the roster to then be able to win. And then when you pay the quarterback, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't always work out the best way because of who you have to get rid of on your roster.
But you know what? I look at this Giants roster, and then I'd really like to be done talking about the Giants because
that's fine.
I look at this Giants roster, and other than Saquon Barkley, who, again, when healthy, is one of the best running backs in football, but for the fact that he has a terrible offensive line.
Yeah.
Nobody on this team scares me.
Yeah,
Nobody on the receivers that they brought in last year were, you can't even say they were mediocre. They were bad. Having your top two wide receivers having combined for 0 touchdowns is an abomination to what football has become, which is a passing league.
I'm very, and I didn't bring this question up because I didn't want to talk too much offense with Lance, but the last thing that I'll leave with, a player that I'm really wondering what's going to happen with, and his rookie campaign, he blossomed. Darius Slayton, the receiver, because if you look at their receivers, look, Kenny Galladay, they have Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, they drafted. They have Sterling Shepard. That's 4 guys there. Is he the 5th guy? He struggled last year. Of course, the quarterback play wasn't very great. They signed Richie James, who's like a returner. So, again, every team has their questions, but that's one that, he kind of burst out, and you thought he'd be a solid number 2 guy, good slot receiver, be able to, provide for them. And unfortunately, the quarterback position didn't help them, and he's just struggled a little bit. And just, that was an interesting thing I was going to bring up, but I didn't want to get too much. I wanted to get to the defensive side of the ball with that. But again, we can stop talking about the Giants and get to a little more important things.
They're stupid. The Giants are stupid. They're without a doubt the worst team in the NFC East, and it's not by a little bit, it's by a lot of it. They are a bad team, and they only got worse. And judging by what I'm seeing, and now we've done the tour of the NFC East, judging by what I've seen in these other teams, I thought it was the Eagles' division to lose before. It is 100% the Philadelphia Eagles' division to lose.
I'm going to agree with you, especially like Lance said, with the news of Tyron Smith possibly missing 3 to 4 months. That's a huge hole. What they're going to do with that position, that's going to be the biggest question.
Don't care. Can't wait to send our defensive lineman through.
Listen, it's going to impact the quarterback play when your offensive line, you're replacing. Lyle Collins is gone. Connor Williams is gone. Now Tyron Smith is hurt. You can say your backups are great. You have these young guys and everything.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, because if your starters and guys who are, Tyron Smith is older. I get that, but he's still a capable player and still a talented player when he's on the field. So missing him is going to be a big, with all the other things we detailed. I detailed it with Roy White, and he said, he said all the right things with it, but again, he said the gap has closed between the Eagles and Cowboys, and I feel like it's closed even more to almost the Eagles getting to that point where
the Eagles, in my opinion, are offensive line one of the top in football.
Oh, no doubt.
No doubt. Defensively, the front 7 is quickly becoming a top tier defensive front. And then wide receivers, if we can get Jalen Hurts to throw the ball successfully, we have very sneakily one of the top wide receiving trios in all of football.
No,
the Eagles are quickly climbing up and waiting for a piece to click in. The Cowboys may have missed their window. And as Gator's saying here, I don't see the Dallas being able to hold up early in the season. I agree. And they've got money in all the wrong places. Like they doubled down on Ezekiel Elliott, who came into Dallas with very little tread left on his tires, and it's only gotten worse. He's not even the best running back in Dallas. So I do think that the Eagles, it is their division to lose, and I would like to see, the roster play that way. Now, Eagles news-wise, they were supposed to be having joint practices with the Dolphins all week. We've seen some of the videos. I mean, Darius Slay got beat by the fastest guy in football, and then left for a little bit, and that's fine. It is what it is. They didn't do their joint practices today because the Dolphins had a stomach bug rip through their locker room.
I was going to say rip through their intestines, but
through their intestines. Yes,
maybe
Johnny,
it
very
did
nice.
because they said there were a lot of people vomiting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they said that was.
Should they still play the preseason game?
My opinion, it's going to be all backup. So I'm.
See, so hold on, because we talked about this a little bit on Sunday with Hugh Douglas, and we were trying to figure out. Not Hugh Douglas, I'm sorry, Hollis Thomas. My brain's not there. I'm thinking about Hugh Douglas, who is getting inducted into the Eagles Wall of Fame. With Hollis Thomas and trying to figure out the new landscape of what the preseason games look like. So the first game, they played the starters a little bit. Second game, they basically sit everybody because of the joint practices. Is the third game the dress rehearsal, or is it another shutdown game, in which case you've got back-to-back bye weeks for your starters?
Well, that's a good question because – it's funny you said that. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing their starters.
They're playing Tom Brady.
Even Tom Brady, which is very surprising. And my thing, what I would love to see, and I've seen it, I've heard it around, they should televise the joint practices.
They should.
That would be great because, it's a great tool to be able to, they're going up one-on-one. You have the top players, the starters going up against each other. It would be fun to watch. But for me, it's basically the third preseason game is what the fourth preseason game used to be, in my opinion. And I feel like the Eagles did it the way they did it this year was because they only had one home game, so they wanted the starters to play in front of the home crowd. That's kind of how I thought about the way they did.
But then, are your starters getting enough reps throughout the preseason in live action?
If you have the joint practices, I feel like they're getting a good amount of reps. Cleveland, they had 2 joint practices with them. They had 1 with Miami. And then the first game of the preseason, they played the first drive. I think it's okay. I don't think you have to play them too much because the problem with it is you get to the point where you play your starters in the third preseason game and someone goes down with a major injury. Then again, why these guys play? So it's basically it's a lose-lose situation if you look at it that way, because if you play them and they get hurt, you said, why'd you play them? You should have sat them. And if you don't play them, it's, you need to get reps. Why aren't you playing them? So you get to that lose-lose situation in terms of that. But again, it's about the third preseason game to me is about the roster, and it's about being able to see who's the last couple guys that are going to make the team and along the lines of that.
Yeah. And again, Gator, I love that, he's putting the comments in, we have to, all the new players need reps, with Tom Brady again, cause he's a Buccaneers fan. And yes, unless someone starts slinging helmets. So before we get into our roster predictions, as we get kind of to the last big segment of our show, what are your thoughts on the Super Bowl rematch helmet swinging Aaron Donald, and how long of a suspension is he going to get?
I don't think he's going to get anything.
I think you're out of your mind.
Joint practices are not whatever happens in them. It's team. The teams are the ones that police it, not the NFL. Now the NFL may
that the video got out.
I understand that, but again, the teams are the ones who, the ones that police it. And I was listening to. Before the show, I was listening to Jim Miller, former quarterback of the Chicago Bears and Pittsburgh Steelers, and Pat Kerwin on Sirius XM, plug in where Lance speaks. But
nice.
What they were talking about was that you could see with joint practices and stuff like that, it goes with rules and teams fining players and along the lines of that. But most likely you will not see a suspension or anything like that. The NFL won't step in. Now, the NFL may step in now because of what happened. They may step in and then start policing what goes on in these joint practices and along the lines of that. But as of right now, I don't see anything happening to Aaron Donald. And he had 2 helmets in his hands. He was slinging both of them. So
correct.
Yeah.
Minimum 6 games.
I don't think they're going to do that to a player now. If it was like a no-name player, maybe.
They got Myles Garrett for how long?
Again, like I said, the teams are the ones that police it. If the
And
Rams want to go ahead and do it,
I hear you, but the video got out.
I understand. That's just my take on it. I don't think anything.
I think he gets a minimum of 6 games.
Deshaun Watson got 11 for what he did.
We're not doing
sorry,
that.
I'm not going there. We can go.
We ain't doing that. Yeah, I mean, we did a post-game show with the Eagles and the Browns. I mean, there wasn't a ton to talk about. Yes, Gator, it was smart not to throw a fist. I agree, but double helmets is not the way to go. So we're now getting to a point where, first off, let's just talk about Howie Roseman, and he traded. I didn't even have a chance to learn his name. What was the guy's name?
Hugo Amadi.
Yeah, well, you go away after one game is what he did, because he was traded for J-Jaw and then immediately traded to the Titans. I don't even have words for sometimes how impressed I am by Howie Roseman. And I never thought I'd feel that way, because just a year and a half ago, we were making spoof videos about trying to fire Howie Roseman, and it was Chowie Kegs. Like, it was ridiculous. So what? What happened?
Well, now Amadi did get some run. I saw that he played 33 snaps on Sunday, 27 defensive, and I believe 6 special teams. So he did get a lot of run in the game. And it came to the point where I just don't think he was going to make the team. So you have a team like Tennessee, you give them a 7th round pick in 2024, not in this next draft, but the following draft. And then you move up around and get a 6th round pick for essentially a player who was going to get cut and most likely claimed by somebody. And J-Jaw was also going to be cut. So they used him to get Amadi to then turn that into a 6th round pick. But the best thing was on Twitter, RJ Ochoa, who's covers the Dallas Cowboys, said that Eagles did that and got a 6th round pick, and the Cowboys traded Amari Cooper for a 5th and a 6th.
That's what I'm saying.
So it is what it is. But to me, this screams that, and you'll see when we kind of get into our roster and the defense side of the ball, I don't think the Eagles are done at the safety position.
No.
Who
else are they going to get?
Well, we can start getting into it.
Well, all right. Let's pull it up, shall we?
We can.
All right.
So I did a 53-man roster prediction. I will be posting it tomorrow on the Instagram page. So check that out too. If you don't see it on here, whatever. But so I'm not going to really get into each positional group. I'm just going to kind of get into the main things. Hold
on, I'm gonna try something else here, because that's really small and it hurts my heart.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about the one decision on the offensive side of the ball, which I'm sure you saw. I went with 5 receivers.
It's a little better.
And I left somebody off.
You did.
Now, I left 2 people off. A lot of people, Britton Covey and Jalen Reagor. So to me, I feel that there could possibly be a trade in the works. They're pumping him up so much to try to be able to move him and give him a new start. Deion Kane, he played really well. He's played really well this preseason. He's back from his injury. He used to play at Clemson. I know your co-host, JD, on your Monday show knows him very well. He did get hurt when he was drafted and everything. He was coming back from a couple injuries, some major injuries. So he's kind of getting himself, he's kind of all the way back. And he is a bigger receiver, a possession guy, but can play special teams, can do a number of things. And then, I kept 3 running backs. I kept only 2 quarterbacks. I feel like one of those other Sinnett or Carson Strong are going to be on the practice squad. Again, the practice squad is 16 players, and 6 of those players can be veterans. So, for me, there's a lot of players you could try and stash on the practice squad. Offensive line, I kept 10 guys. The Eagles always like to keep tons of offensive linemen.
Yep.
The guys I had I wasn't too sure was Jack Anderson and Suo Opeta. Those are my last 2 guys I was kind of on the fence. I kept both of them just because. Tight end, I don't think if they go with 2 tight ends, I do not think they are able to slip Grant Calcaterra through waivers, put him on the practice squad. I think he gets claimed. So I think in this aspect, they keep him on the roster. So it's kind of where I am with the offensive side of the ball.
So I'm gonna start at the top on based off your roster prediction. So obviously, quarterback, that's easy. Reed Sinnett plays another year on the practice squad, and probably gets picked up because he's doing a nice job. He's putting some good stuff on paper. Carson Strong gets cut. He has attempted one pass in the preseason. He has had an absolutely terrible camp.
Are they hiding him so another team doesn't claim him so they can sneak him through and put him on the practice squad?
Every single report is that he has had just an awful camp, and he's not even getting a chance.
It's his knee because I know he had a lot of medical red flags.
It's the knee, but it's also like yes, he has a strong arm, but it is completely and totally untamed, and he's been struggling for sure. I think running backs, it's those three because there's no one else that we have. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and Kenny Gainwell are the only NFL caliber running backs.
Yeah. You're right.
Why? So then here's where only disagreement I'll have with you. I think the offensive line, they keep 10. I think those 10. I think special teams are going to be those 10 or those 3. I mean, there's no one else to do it. I'm actually really glad that we now didn't draft, Matt Ariza from the Bills because some news just came out about him, and I'd rather that not be around. So if you're interested in finding out why people are pieces of garbage, check out the Matt Ariza story. But I do feel that it's going to be 2 tight ends. Grant Calcaterra gets put on the practice squad.
Hey, if they're able to slip him on there, I'm totally fine with that.
For sure. And I do think that Jalen Reagor is on this team to start the year. I think he's actually the number 4 receiver. Because I feel like he's put enough on paper to at least earn that attempt. Now, whether or not they trade him before, a trade deadline, whether or not they trade him as players start to get hurt, whether or not they cut him. But I do think they keep him. Deion Kane, who is exceptionally fast, I think that they're actually going to put Britton Covey on instead for the return man purposes.
Okay. No, I get that. And
even though Jalen Reagor's listed as the main return man, I think that Britton Covey keeps your trade commodity safer.
I would really like to see Britton Covey play with Gardner Minshew and not Reed Sinnett and kind of see, what he has. I think there's a lot of there's intrigue with him. And the thing with it is he's an older rookie. He's 25 years old already. But he's got that elusiveness and that quickness. And if he's able to boost your return game, because that's one thing we haven't seen since Darren Sproles. I know Reagor had a touchdown against the Packers in 2020, but it's been since Darren Sproles that you haven't had an electric type of return game and a returner to be able to put some fear in other team special teams units.
And it changes football when you have that. I mean, we saw it for all those years with Brian Mitchell. We saw it for all those years with Deshaun Jackson. We saw that for all those years with Westbrook when he was back there. We saw it for what's that?
You can flip the field. You get a great return. You're in a better position to,
And I know that football is moving away from the return game, but there's a reason why a guy like Devin Hester is in consideration for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He is a game-changing player. Yeah, and I'm not saying that Britton Covey can be one, but I feel like he's one of the best returners that we have on the roster. So I think that's earning him a roster spot.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I'd love to keep him on, and maybe I should just kept 2 tight ends and added a 6th receiver. But again, I played a little bit with the positions, and the defense side of the ball I think is more of the fun topic. This was kind of a little bit simple, the offensive side of the ball. More simple.
Right, well, let's put it on the screen for the people then. Hang on.
And I want to see if you notice who I left off.
All right, hang on. Here it comes. And it's up. Okay.
It may not be as easy or as clear cut, but no, I mean
no. Oh no, he's on. Okay, so hold on. You have it broken down weird, so I'm like looking for like defensive linemen and defensive tackles, like defensive ends.
The D-line of the guys, because they're going to be playing a lot of 3-4, 4-2. They're going to play a lot of different schemes. The edge of the edge rushers. linebackers, and then corners and safeties. Now, I kept a lot of defensive backs, but again,
You did. I don't think Andre charcuterie board makes it.
Chachere.
Yeah, charcuterie, exactly.
No, I think he does because he's a great special teamer and can play nickel.
I don't think Josh Jobe makes it. I think that they got to get somebody. They'll pick up somebody off of a waiver somewhere. I mean, some of these guys I don't think make the team. I don't think they have enough put on paper. I don't think they're good enough.
There you go. Do you see Davion Taylor on there?
They're not going to cut Davion Taylor.
Listen, here's my reasoning. Okay, he wasn't drafted by this coaching staff, and I know how he drafted him. He tries to give him as much. This is my. Will it happen? May not. But what I think is they're not going to keep a ton of linebackers because the way they're going to be playing defense, I think you're going to see a lot more defensive backs than you're going to see. And I think a player like Kayvon Wallace is going to stay. He's had a good second part of the camp. Same with Josh Jobe. And Tay Gowan's played really well on special teams. Of course, the defensive line is what it is. I do have Marlon Tuipulotu on there because he has the nose tackle capabilities, being able to play that position. The edge rushers basically is kind of clear cut. And linebacker Edwards, White, Nakobe Dean, Sean Bradley, Patrick Johnson, and Kyron Johnson, they're more of like stand-up, strong side linebackers. Could they add another linebacker, a veteran, or a guy off the waiver wire? Sure.
No, they're going to take Davion Taylor.
I'm just saying, don't be surprised. Maybe he's traded. Maybe there's an aspect of that.
What could they trade him for?
That's my surprise.
He doesn't have enough on paper right now.
Listen, the Eagles always do a surprise cut. You always have someone that's surprised. So there's my surprise. And also, I don't have Jaquiski Tart on there.
Why would you?
I know he's a veteran. And this is where what I said before about the safety position not being done. Josiah Scott had a hamstring issue. I know he was hurt. He's played nickelback and played some free safety. Anthony Harris, we saw what he was last year. And the reason I kept Anthony Harris over Jaquiski Tart is because he's more familiar with the defense. And Tart has had a little bit struggles. I like the signing when it happened, but sometimes things don't work out. In my opinion, it's not going to work out. Chachere can play nickelback, can play safety, can play special teams. Kayvon Wallace.
Wallace, I said this last year too, and I guess I was wrong. It is a put up or shut up year for this kid.
Yeah, and he's played well.
The fact that he has not claimed a starting job at this point shows me a lot.
Now, this is where I get into there's going to be teams that are going to either be able to trade a safety. They have so many safeties on the roster, defensive backs, and along the lines of that, Eagles, they'd be able to trade. I think they have one more move in them, and I think it's going to be at the safety position. And we talked about it this offseason, about safety was a weakness. Marcus Epps never been a full-time starter. He has played well in camp and everything along the lines of that. But I think the Eagles, this defense, I think you have to have 3 safeties because you're going to have to be able to rotate, keep guys fresh. And I feel like it's going to help Marcus Epps and Anthony Harris to have a third guy able to be able, some snaps. Who that player is, I don't know. There's a couple names I like, but not saying it's going to happen. Chuck Clark from Baltimore, we've talked about him. I like him a lot, can do so many things. A name that I did see before we came on that I started thinking about that I wouldn't mind, and no, it's not Jesse Bates, kind of past that point, is the New Orleans Saints have a player on a contract year, is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Okay.
He plays nickelback, plays safety. He's on they signed Marcus Williams. They signed Tyrann Mathieu. They re-signed PJ Williams. They have Alante Taylor. They drafted a couple guys. So they have a loaded backfield. And there was a report by Nick Underhill, who is one of their writers that covers the New Orleans Saints, talking about teams are calling the Saints because of how loaded some of their positions are for possible trades. And so that's what kind of, made me think about that. But again, I think you're going to see a surprise. Eagles always have a surprise. My surprise is Davion Taylor. But we'll see. I did pose that to Mike, who one of our co-hosts for this show. I did pose him, and he gave me the flat. Same thing you did. No. So I'm the only one in that realm of thinking possibly He's no longer on the roster. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, and maybe we'll see what this last preseason game does, and if he can get anything on paper. I mean, it's not that he has had necessarily a bad camp or a good. I mean, he's kind of just been there.
Yeah. No, and for me, I would love nothing for them to add to the safety group, and if they can add a player that basically is almost putting that stamp on the offseason of reassuring the fan base that you're strengthening each of the positions that they've asked you to strengthen. And safety is the last one that's kind of, and I'm not talking running back because I still feel running back.
We need a running back. Honestly, with the concern about Miles Sanders' health, you cannot go into a season where you're supposed to be the NFC East front runners. You cannot go into a season with Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell as your only running backs.
Jordan Howard's out there.
That's what I'm saying.
I had to throw that out there. And even a guy like Kenyon Drake or something, a veteran off the lines, I'm not trading for a Kareem Hunt or giving up premium picks for a running back when you look at the way the roster is. Your
unless you feel that Jalen Hurts can lead you to a Super Bowl this year, in which case you do.
We'll see. The Eagles did it in 2017 with Jay Ajayi, and they had LeGarrette Blount. They signed LeGarrette Blount late. Jay Ajayi. And they had Corey Clement, and they had a number of backs. So, Darren Sproles will get hurt that year, unfortunately, too. So, do they have some more moves in them? Again, your roster's never fully set. There's always moving pieces. They always make some interesting things. Like, again, they made an interesting trade. They traded J-Jaw, then traded the guy they got for J-Jaw. So,
it's absolutely brilliant.
Things are moving, and next week's episode is going to be on Wednesday. Now, the fun part about it is it's going to be kind of our prediction show, but also the cut day is the 31st at 4 p.m. So we're going to be able to break down what moves the Eagles make, who they cut, how wrong I was in my prediction, and we'll be able to go over all that stuff. But that's going to be a fun episode, and to be able to kind of go through all that, to be able to give our predictions, what we kind of think the Eagles are going to be this year, because we really haven't done that yet. We've kind of held off.
We've been keeping it very close to our chests,
which is fine, and see where the division lines up, see what we have in terms of the Eagles. So it should be a fun episode next week, next Wednesday, the 31st.
It shall. Hey, as a reminder, we always like to say this. First off, thank you to Lance Medow for joining us tonight from the New York Giants. Awesome guest, gave us a really good insight on everything. So huge thank you to Lance Medow. Huge thank you to the people in the comment box. I want to give Gator a special shout out because my man rocked with us for an entire hour and 4 minutes. So shout out to Gator. Appreciate you, my friend. Gator. Don't forget, we have a lot of really great sponsors here. The links are all in the bios, but we have the Statement Games, a fun free twist on fantasy sports. Check it out. The AATSportsNetwork.com/shop. Of course, we'll be adding new designs as Eagles start to do new cool things. Johnny is wearing one of the shirts in the shop right now. It's Hurts season. Symbol.com, stock market for sports. Use the code when you sign up, AAT Sports. Vinny's Pizza and Restaurant in Allentown, which is right next to Stuff to the Grills, right in the Old Town Shopping Center in Allentown. Make sure you're checking that out. And as we have been trying to share with you, we cannot stress this enough. Please get your tickets to the ultimate bus trip to FedEx Field on September 25th. Get your tickets now, though. The link is in the bio. You want to come on this trip. Food, beverages, a T-shirt, and lower level tickets to the Eagles Commanders game where Carson is going to attempt to, survive. I'm cool if he doesn't. Just saying. I'm Chip. That's Johnny. Yeah, that's Johnny over there. As we end every show here on the AAT Sports Network and AATBirds, very positive and a very happy. Go Birds!
Go Birds!